The diner hummed with the casual bustle of a weekday morning, the scent of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee mingling in the air. It was a small but beloved spot on the corner of a quiet Midwestern town, with checkerboard floors and a neon sign that flickered slightly as if winking at its loyal patrons. The Blue Plate Diner had built a reputation over the years for its hearty breakfasts, friendly atmosphere, and open arms policy that welcomed everyone. Or at least that's what most people thought. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. One Tuesday morning, a man walked into the diner wearing a red MAGA hat, its bold white lettering immediately catching the eye of several diners and staff members alike. The man appeared to be in his late 40s, with sharp blue eyes and a weathered face that suggested a life of hard work. His jeans were frayed at the hem, and his boots bore the scuffs of someone who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Yet, despite his modest appearance, there was something commanding about the way he carried himself, a quiet confidence that hinted at layers beneath the surface. As he stepped up to the counter, the atmosphere in the diner shifted. Conversation slowed, forks paused mid-air, and a subtle tension seemed to ripple through the room. Behind the counter stood Jessica, a waitress in her early 20s with a bright smile and a no-nonsense attitude. She noticed the hat immediately and narrowed her eyes slightly, her cheerful demeanor dimming just enough to be noticeable. Jessica had strong opinions and she wasn't shy about them. To her, the hat represented something she despised: division, hatred, and a world she didn't want to live in. The man placed his hands on the counter and gave her a polite nod. "Good morning," he said in a deep, even tone. "Can I get a cup of coffee to start?" Jessica hesitated, her fingers tightening on the notepad she held. She glanced at the hat again and felt a surge of irritation. Normally, she prided herself on her professionalism, but something about that red cap set her on edge. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice as if to keep the conversation from spilling over to the other diners. "We don't serve people like you here," she said, her tone clipped. The man raised an eyebrow, his expression calm but inquisitive. "People like me?" he asked, his voice betraying neither anger nor offense. Jessica nodded toward the hat. "Yeah, people who wear that. I think it's pretty clear what you stand for, and we don't need that kind of negativity in here." For a moment, the man didn't respond. He simply studied her, his gaze steady and unflinching. The silence stretched long enough for Jessica to start feeling uncomfortable, but she refused to back down. She crossed her arms and stood her ground, her chin tilted upward in defiance. "You sure about that?" the man finally asked, his tone measured. "Positive," Jessica replied, though a small part of her felt a twinge of doubt. She wasn't used to being challenged in this way, and something about the man's composed demeanor unsettled her. "All right," the man said, lifting his hands in a gesture of surrender. "I'll respect your decision. But before I go, let me ask you something." Jessica frowned but nodded for him to continue. "What makes you think you know me? You saw this hat and decided you had me all figured out, didn't you?" Jessica bristled. "I don't need to know you to know what that hat represents." "Interesting," the man said, leaning slightly on the counter. "Because if you did know me, you might think twice before making assumptions. For starters, this diner, it's mine." Jessica froze, the color draining from her face as the weight of his words sank in. Around the room, a few diners who had overheard the exchange gasped softly, their eyes darting between Jessica and the man in the red hat. The hum of conversation ceased altogether, leaving the room in a stunned silence. "You're kidding," Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man shook his head. "Not at all. My name's Jack Reynolds. I bought this place 5 years ago. Kept the old name because it had history, but make no mistake, this diner belongs to me." Jessica's mind raced as she tried to process what she had just heard. She had worked at the diner for nearly a year and had never met the owner. The manager, Mark, handled the day-to-day operations, and Jack had always stayed behind the scenes. Now, here he was, standing in front of her, his red hat as bold and unapologetic as ever. I didn't know," Jessica stammered, her confidence crumbling. "Clearly," Jack said, his tone still calm but with an edge of disappointment. "Let me tell you something, Jessica. This place is supposed to be a haven for everyone, no matter who they are or what they believe. That's the kind of business I wanted to run when I bought it, and that's the kind of place I still want it to be. What you just did? That goes against everything this diner stands for." Jessica's cheeks flushed with shame as she realized the gravity of her actions. She had let her personal biases cloud her judgment and acted in a way that not only reflected poorly on her but also on the diner itself. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. Jack nodded but didn't let her off the hook just yet. "I appreciate the apology, but words aren't enough. I need to know that you understand what you did and why it's a problem." Jessica swallowed hard and nodded. "I judged you without knowing anything about you. I assumed the worst because of a hat, and that was wrong." "Good," Jack said. "Now let me tell you a little about myself. I wear this hat because I believe in certain principles: hard work, freedom, and the idea that everyone deserves a fair shot. But just because I wear it doesn't mean I hate anyone or want to see people divided. I've spent my life trying to bring people together, not tear them apart." Jessica listened intently, her earlier defensiveness replaced by a genuine desire to understand. She realized that she had allowed her assumptions to create a barrier between herself and a man who, by all accounts, seemed to value inclusivity more than she had in that moment. "I want to make it right," she said earnestly. "Please tell me what I can do." Jack gave her a small smile, his earlier sternness softening. "Start by treating every customer with respect, no matter what they're wearing or what you think they believe. This diner isn't just a place to eat, it's a place where people should feel welcome. If you can commit to that, we'll be fine." "I can do that," Jessica said, nodding firmly. Jack extended his hand across the counter. "Then we're good." Jessica shook his hand, grateful for the chance to make amends. As Jack settled into a booth and ordered his coffee, the atmosphere in the diner gradually returned to normal. Conversations resumed, and the clinking of silverware filled the air once more. But something had shifted, something important. Jessica felt a renewed sense of purpose as she moved through the diner, determined to live up to the principles Jack had laid out. In the weeks that followed, Jessica found herself reflecting often on that fateful morning. She became more mindful of her interactions with customers, making a conscious effort to approach each person with an open mind and a kind heart. And as she did, she noticed a change not only in herself, but also in the diner. The Blue Plate became more than just a place to eat. It became a true community hub, where people from all walks of life could come together and find common ground over a plate of pancakes or a cup of coffee. Jack, for his part, continued to visit the diner regularly, his red MAGA hat always perched proudly on his head. And while some customers still reacted to it with a raised eyebrow or a quiet murmur, Jack remained unfazed. He understood that change took time, and that the best way to bridge divides was through patience, understanding, and a willingness to listen. Jessica worked her next shift with a strange mixture of nervous energy and determination. After her confrontation with Jack, the owner of the diner, she felt the weight of her actions, but also a sense of opportunity to prove herself. She had always considered herself open-minded, yet Jack's calm but direct words exposed a blind spot she didn't know she had. Now her mission was clear: live up to the ideals of the diner's open-door policy and rebuild her own reputation, both in Jack's eyes and within herself. The following morning, Jessica arrived early to the Blue Plate Diner, determined to start fresh. She tidied the counter, straightened the salt shakers on the tables, and made sure the coffee machine was humming smoothly. As the sun rose higher, customers trickled in. Regulars at first, each greeted warmly by Jessica, followed by a few unfamiliar faces. One of the unfamiliar faces belonged to an older woman, her silver hair tucked neatly under a headscarf. Jessica noticed that the woman hesitated at the entrance, clutching her purse tightly as if debating whether to come in. Her worn shoes and patched coat suggested a hard life, and Jessica wondered if the woman felt out of place among the lively chatter and the inviting scent of breakfast. Jessica didn't wait for the woman to decide. She stepped out from behind the counter and approached her with a bright smile. "Good morning. Come on in and grab a seat wherever you'd like. Coffee's fresh, and we've got the best pancakes in town." The woman blinked in surprise, her grip on her purse loosening slightly. "Oh, thank you," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I wasn't sure I'd be welcome." Jessica tilted her head, puzzled. "Of course you're welcome. Everyone's welcome here." The woman's face softened, and she allowed herself to be guided to a booth near the window. Jessica brought her a menu and a steaming cup of coffee, then chatted briefly about the breakfast specials. As she returned to the counter, she noticed Jack sitting in his usual booth, his red MAGA hat sitting beside him. He was watching her, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. The interaction with the older woman had not gone unnoticed by the other patrons either. Jessica realized that moments like these could define the diner's atmosphere just as much as the food or decor. She worked harder to make every guest feel valued, whether they were a regular or a first-timer, wealthy or struggling, young or old. Later that morning, a group of construction workers filed into the diner, their neon vests and work boots marking them as part of the road crew working on a nearby highway. They were boisterous and clearly famished, and Jessica found herself darting between their table and the kitchen with orders of eggs, bacon, and piles of toast. As she served them, one of the men, a burly guy with a thick mustache, looked her over with a frown. "You're not one of those people who gets all high and mighty about politics, are you?" he asked bluntly. Jessica paused, caught off guard. "Why do you ask?" she replied carefully. The man shrugged. "Just wondering. You know, some places get all weird about stuff. Saw the boss over there," he nodded toward Jack's booth, "and figured this place might be one of those judgmental joints." Jessica thought about her answer for a moment, glancing at Jack. He wasn't looking their way, but she knew he was listening. "We don't do that here," she said finally. "Everyone's treated the same. Good food, good service, no matter who you are." The man's face broke into a grin. "Good to hear. Keep the coffee coming, will you?" Jessica laughed and nodded, grateful for the chance to show that her words were backed by actions. As the weeks went by, Jessica found herself becoming increasingly attuned to the nuances of human interaction. She noticed the nervous energy of a man in a suit who sat hunched over his briefcase in a corner booth, the shy smiles of a young couple sharing a milkshake, and the animated storytelling of a grandfather entertaining his grandchildren with tales of his youth. Each customer brought their own story, their own struggles and triumphs, and Jessica began to see the diner as more than just a workplace. It was a microcosm of life itself. One particularly memorable day, a teenage boy walked in wearing a hoodie emblazoned with a rainbow flag. He was alone, his eyes darting nervously around the room as if expecting hostility. Jessica greeted him warmly and seated him at the counter where he ordered a milkshake. As she prepared his drink, she noticed that a few customers glanced at the boy with raised eyebrows, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. Jessica felt a familiar anger bubble up, but quickly reminded herself of Jack's words. She focused on making the boy feel welcome, chatting with him about school and his favorite movies as she placed the milkshake in front of him. Her genuine kindness seemed to put him at ease, and he left the diner with a smile, leaving a generous tip on the counter. Later, as Jessica was cleaning up, Jack approached her. "That kid," he said, nodding toward the counter where the boy had sat. "You handled that well." Jessica looked up, startled. "Thanks. I just wanted to make sure he felt comfortable." Jack nodded, his expression approving. "That's what this place is all about. Good job." Jessica felt a swell of pride, but also a renewed sense of responsibility. The diner wasn't just a place to serve food. It was a place where people could feel seen and valued, no matter who they were. As the seasons changed, the diner became a hub for the community. Local artists displayed their work on the walls, neighborhood kids came in for after-school snacks, and regulars gathered to share stories over cups of coffee. Jack continued to visit regularly, his hat still a lightning rod for conversation, but also a reminder of the lessons Jessica had learned. She had grown to respect him deeply, not just as her boss, but as a person who lived by his principles. One evening, as the diner was winding down, Jack invited Jessica to sit with him for a cup of coffee. She hesitated. She still felt a bit of nervousness around him, but ultimately accepted. They talked about the business, the customers, and life in general. Jessica found herself opening up about her dreams, her struggles, and her gratitude for the second chance he had given her. "You know," Jack said, stirring his coffee thoughtfully, "you've come a long way since that morning. I've been watching, and I can see the difference. You're not just a better waitress, you're a better person." Jessica felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment and pride. "Thanks, Jack. That means a lot coming from you." Jack smiled. "Well, you've earned it, and you've reminded me why I started this place in the first place. It's easy to get caught up in all the noise out there, but at the end of the day, what matters is how we treat each other. You've helped make this diner a better place, and I'm proud of you for that." The conversation left Jessica feeling both humbled and inspired. She realized that the lessons she had learned at the diner extended far beyond its walls. They were lessons about empathy, humility, and the power of connection, lessons she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Over time, the Blue Plate Diner became a symbol of unity in the community. Its reputation spread, drawing people from neighboring towns who had heard about the little diner with the big heart. And while the red MAGA hat continued to spark conversations, it was no longer the source of division it had once been. Instead, it became a reminder of the day Jessica learned that people are far more complex than the labels we assign to them. Years later, when Jessica moved on to pursue her own dreams, she looked back on her time at the Blue Plate Diner with gratitude. It had been more than a job. It had been a turning point in her life, a place where she had learned to see the world through new eyes. And as she opened her own cafe in a nearby town, she carried with her the lessons Jack had taught her, creating a space where everyone felt welcome, no matter who they were or what they believed. Years later, Jessica found herself sitting in the quiet of her own cafe as the morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The little space was a reflection of everything she'd learned during her time at the Blue Plate Diner. A cozy atmosphere, a strong focus on inclusivity, and a belief that food and kindness could bridge even the deepest divides. The cafe was called The Common Ground, a name Jessica had chosen deliberately. It served as a reminder of what she wanted her establishment to represent, a place where people could meet, connect, and find shared humanity over something as simple as a cup of coffee. As she sipped her drink, Jessica's thoughts wandered back to Jack Reynolds and the life-changing day he had walked into the diner wearing his MAGA hat. It was a moment she often reflected on, especially in challenging times. Jack's calm demeanor, his unwillingness to judge her even when she had misjudged him, and his unyielding commitment to inclusivity had left an indelible mark on her. She wondered how he was doing, whether the Blue Plate Diner was still thriving, and if he still stopped by his booth every morning to sip coffee and observe the world around him. Jessica had learned so much during her time under Jack's quiet mentorship, but the most profound lesson was that people are multifaceted. The symbols they wear, the opinions they hold, or even the actions they take in a moment of anger or fear never capture the whole of who they are. Jack had shown her that beneath any surface difference lay a shared humanity waiting to be acknowledged. Her cafe was thriving now, a haven for locals who appreciated its warmth and sense of community. People from all walks of life came through her doors, students seeking a quiet place to study, retirees reminiscing about the past over tea, and travelers passing through town who often remarked on the unique charm of the place. Jessica made a point to greet every customer personally, just as she had learned to do at the diner. She didn't ask questions about their beliefs or backgrounds. She simply treated them as human beings deserving of respect. One morning, Jessica was busy wiping down tables when the familiar chime of the doorbell caught her attention. She looked up to see an older man standing in the entrance, his red MAGA hat as vivid as she remembered. It was Jack. He looked a little grayer than the last time she had seen him, but his eyes were just as sharp, and his presence just as commanding. Jessica broke into a wide smile. "Jack! What are you doing here?" Jack stepped inside, his boots clicking softly against the tiled floor. He surveyed the cafe with a discerning eye, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Heard you were running a cafe of your own now," he said. "Figured I'd come see if you learned anything from your time at my place." Jessica laughed and crossed the room to give him a hug. "I learned from the best," she said sincerely. "Come in, have a seat. First coffee's on the house." Jack settled into a table near the window, and Jessica brought him a steaming cup of black coffee, just the way he liked it. She pulled up a chair across from him, eager to catch up. "How's the diner?" she asked. "Still the heart of the community?" Jack nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "It's doing well. Got a good team running it now, though I still stop by to keep an eye on things. You know me, I can't stay away for too long." Jessica grinned. "I can imagine. You were always so hands-on, even when you pretended not to be." Jack chuckled. "Guilty as charged. But enough about me. Tell me about this place. It's got a good vibe. Feels welcoming, like it's meant to be more than just a cafe." It is, Jessica said, her tone earnest. I wanted to create a space where people could come together, no matter who they are or what they believe. It's all about finding common ground, you know? That's why I named it that. Jack nodded thoughtfully. You've done a fine job. This place has heart, I can tell. They talked for a while longer, reminiscing about the Blue Plate Diner and sharing updates about their lives. Jessica told Jack about the regulars who had become like family to her, the challenges of running a business, and the moments that made it all worthwhile. Jack listened intently, offering advice and encouragement in his usual calm and measured way. As they spoke, a man in a suit walked in carrying a briefcase and glancing around nervously. Jessica excused herself and approached him with a warm smile. Welcome to the common ground. Can I get you something to drink? The man hesitated, then nodded. Just a coffee, please. Black. Jessica quickly prepared his order and handed it to him, noticing the tension in his posture. If you need anything else, just let me know, she said kindly. The man nodded again but didn't respond. He chose a seat near the back of the cafe, his eyes scanning the room as if he were afraid of being watched. Jessica returned to her conversation with Jack, but she couldn't help glancing at the man now and then, wondering what had brought him here and why he seemed so uneasy. Jack noticed her distraction and followed her gaze. Looks like you've got someone who could use a little kindness, he remarked. Jessica nodded. I'll check on him in a bit. I've learned that sometimes all it takes is a kind word to make someone feel welcome. Jack smiled. You're a natural at this, Jessica. I'm proud of you. Jessica felt a swell of pride at his words, but quickly shifted her focus back to the man in the corner. After a few minutes, she walked over to his table. How's the coffee? She asked. The man looked up, startled. It's good, he said, his voice low. Thank you. Jessica nodded, sensing that he wasn't ready to talk much. Well, let me know if you need anything else. You're welcome to stay as long as you like. As she walked away, she saw the man's shoulders relax slightly. It was a small thing, but Jessica knew that even small gestures could make a big difference. After Jack finished his coffee, he stood and placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. You've done something special here, he said. Keep it up. Jessica watched as he walked out the door, his red MAGA hat a vivid contrast against the bright morning light. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons he had taught her and the second chance he had given her. Without Jack, she might never have learned the importance of seeing beyond appearances and treating everyone with respect. The day went on, and the cafe buzzed with activity. A group of college students crowded around a table, laughing and sharing notes. An elderly couple held hands as they sipped their tea. A mother juggled her toddler and a plate of pastries, her face lighting up with relief when Jessica offered to help carry her coffee. Each interaction reinforced Jessica's belief in the power of connection and the beauty of a place where everyone felt they belonged. As the sun set and the last customers trickled out, Jessica locked the door and turned off the lights. She stood in the quiet of the empty cafe, reflecting on how far she had come. The journey had not always been easy, but it had been worth it. She had found her purpose in creating a space where people could find not just nourishment for their bodies, but also for their souls. And as she prepared to head home, Jessica couldn't help but think that Jack would be proud. The common ground was more than just a cafe. It was a legacy of the lessons he had taught her, and a testament to the enduring power of kindness, understanding, and the simple act of sharing a meal. As the months passed, the common ground became more than just a cafe. It transformed into a focal point of the community. Jessica noticed how different people found comfort in the space, forming connections that might not have been possible elsewhere. It wasn't unusual to see a high school teacher grading papers at one table while a group of construction workers laughed over their coffee at another. The cafe became a patchwork quilt of personalities, each stitch reinforcing the sense of belonging Jessica had worked so hard to cultivate. One particularly quiet morning, Jessica decided to tackle some paperwork at one of the tables near the window. She had been so focused on her customers for months that she'd neglected to pause and reflect on the bigger picture. As she reviewed receipts and supplier orders, she noticed a handwritten note tucked under a small pile of receipts. Curious, she unfolded it and immediately recognized the careful handwriting. The note was from one of her regulars, an elderly woman named Margaret, who often stopped by for tea and a scone after her morning walk. Margaret was soft-spoken but always observant, and she had written, Dear Jessica, I don't say much when I visit, but I want you to know what this place means to me. Since my husband passed, I've felt invisible in the world, like I don't belong anywhere. But here at the common ground, I feel seen. Your smile, your kindness, and the way you make everyone feel welcome have given me a reason to get up every morning. Thank you for that. With gratitude, Margaret. Jessica sat back in her chair, the words filling her with emotion. She hadn't realized the impact her cafe was having on people in ways she couldn't see. Margaret's letter was a reminder that every kind gesture, no matter how small, could ripple outward and touch lives in profound ways. Inspired, Jessica decided to take her mission even further. She began hosting community nights once a month where anyone could come to share stories, perform music, or simply spend time together. The events brought a surge of energy to the cafe, drawing a mix of regulars and newcomers. Musicians brought guitars, poets shared heartfelt verses, and families brought their children to experience the lively atmosphere. The nights were filled with laughter, applause, and the unmistakable warmth of human connection. One evening, during a particularly lively community night, Jessica looked around and marveled at the scene unfolding before her. At one table, a college student was deep in conversation with a retired history professor. At another, two mothers shared tips on raising toddlers while their children played with crayons on a nearby table. In a corner, a young man nervously read a poem he'd written, his voice trembling but growing stronger as the room encouraged him with applause. It was in that moment that Jessica realized her cafe had become more than she'd ever dreamed it could be. It wasn't just a business, it was a living, breathing representation of everything she believed in. It was a place where people of all backgrounds could come together and remind one another of their shared humanity. The note from Margaret now hung framed behind the counter, a quiet symbol of the purpose that drove Jessica every day. The common ground wasn't just a place to serve food or coffee. It was a sanctuary, a meeting place, and a testament to the power of empathy and understanding. And for Jessica, it was a constant reminder of the transformative lesson she had learned years ago from a man in a red hat who had taught her that the simplest acts of kindness could change the world. As the common ground continued to thrive, Jessica realized that her cafe had begun to attract people from outside the small town. Word of mouth, fueled by the heartfelt testimonials of her regulars and the occasional social media post, brought travelers, bloggers, and even journalists curious to experience the unique charm of the cafe. It wasn't just the food or coffee that drew them, it was the sense of something deeper, something rare. The stories of the cafe's inclusivity, its atmosphere of acceptance, and Jessica's unwavering dedication to kindness had taken on a life of their own. One afternoon, a woman walked in with a camera slung over her shoulder and a notebook tucked under her arm. She introduced herself as Lisa, a writer for a regional magazine, and asked if she could interview Jessica for an article. Jessica, though flattered, hesitated at first. She didn't think of herself as someone worth interviewing. She was just doing what felt right. As they sat down for the interview, Lisa asked, "What inspired you to create a space like this? It's rare to find a place where people seem so genuinely connected." Jessica thought for a moment before answering. "It goes back to where I started, at the Blue Plate Diner. The owner, Jack, taught me something I've carried with me ever since, that everyone, no matter where they come from or what they believe, deserves respect. He showed me that kindness isn't just about being polite. It's about really seeing people and creating spaces where they feel safe and valued." Lisa leaned forward, intrigued. "That's a powerful philosophy. Do you think it's something that's missing in a lot of places today?" Jessica nodded. "I think we're all so quick to judge or label people, especially in the world we live in now. But when you strip all that away, we're not so different. We all want to feel connected, to feel like we belong somewhere. That's what I try to do here. Give people a place where they can let their guard down and just be themselves." If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the restaurant refusing to serve a man with a MAGA hat? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.